In the harsh Arizona desert, where most see only desolation, an unexpected connection blooms between two worlds. A lonely rancher discovers a wounded indigenous woman and makes a choice that will transform not just their lives, but create a legacy that defies the boundaries of culture and time. This is a story of courage, healing, and how extending a hand to a stranger can create an oasis in life's driest moments. If this resonates with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your journey with us begins now. The sun bled across the Arizona sky, painting the desert in furious crimson. Caleb Holt sat on his weathered porch, the cedar boards beneath him groaning with age and memory. 63 years of life had etched themselves into his face like the dried creek beds that scarred the land around him. His eyes, the color of faded denim, gazed westward, where the light was dying. 6 months since Martha had gone. 6 months of silence in a house once warmed by her laughter. The doctors had called it consumption, as if giving it a name could make sense of how something so vital could simply consume itself into nothingness. He'd watched her fade, day by day, her body becoming translucent, until that final morning when she'd squeezed his hand one last time, her eyes filled with a distant light. "The land remembers," she'd whispered. Caleb lifted the tin cup too, his lips, the whiskey burning a familiar path down his throat. The Singing Rocks Ranch had been their dream, carved from stubborn earth over 30 years. Now it sang only for ghosts. Inside the house, Martha's shawl still hung by the door. Her collection of painted desert stones still lined the windowsill, catching the day's final light. He couldn't bring himself to move them, as if disturbing these artifacts might erase what little remained of her presence. The wind changed direction, carrying with it the scent of sage and coming rain. Caleb's horse, an aging palomino named Dust, nickered softly from the corral. The animal sensed the weather turning before any cloud appeared on the horizon. Martha had always said Dust had the knowing, an old Apache belief she'd learned from trading with the local tribes in their early years. Caleb set down his cup and closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, he could almost see her moving through their kitchen, humming softly, her hands working bread dough with practiced grace. The phantom scent of baking sourdough mingled with the desert air. "I'm still here," he said to the empty chair beside him. His words scattered like seeds on barren ground. Night settled around him like a shroud. Stars emerged, pinpricks of cold fire in the vastness. Martha had known their names, the stories behind each constellation. Knowledge lost now, like so much else. Caleb rose stiffly, his bones protesting the day's labor and the evening's stillness. Tomorrow would be the same as today, and the day after. An endless procession of identical suns, rising and setting on a man who had forgotten how to mark time. Beyond the rhythm of necessary tasks, he stepped inside, leaving his boots by the door, and moved through the darkened house by memory. In their bedroom, the quilt Martha had made for their 20th anniversary lay smoothed across the bed. Caleb touched the fabric gently, his calloused fingers catching on the intricate stitches. He slept on his side only, leaving hers undisturbed, as if at any moment she might return to claim her place. Sleep, when it came, brought dreams of water in the desert, impossible blooms erupting from sand, and Martha, young again, walking among them, her laughter carried on the wind. Dawn broke harsh and unforgiving. Caleb rose before the sun, as he had every day for decades, the routine of morning chores, feeding livestock, checking fences, hauling water, anchored him to the world. His body moved through the tasks, while his mind drifted elsewhere, untethered. By mid-morning, the heat had become a physical presence, pressing against his skin. Caleb decided to ride the northern boundary, where coyotes had been troubling his small herd of cattle. He saddled Dust, the familiar movements requiring no thought, and set out across the sun-baked earth. The trail wound through stands of saguaro and palo verde, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across the path. Dust moved at an unhurried pace, knowing the route as well as his rider. The old horse's ears flicked occasionally at the rustle of a lizard or the distant cry of a hawk. They crested a small rise, and Caleb paused, surveying the valley below. The land spoke its own language here, of patience and endurance, of secrets buried beneath stone. Martha had understood this language. She would point to a particular formation of rock or the way certain plants grew together and see meaning, where Caleb saw only wilderness. "The desert doesn't waste," she would say. "Everything serves a purpose, even if we can't see it." Caleb continued along the ridge, letting the horse pick his way through the rocky terrain. The sun climbed higher, bleaching color from the landscape. In the distance, heat mirages shimmered like phantom lakes. It was the unusual behavior of dust that first alerted him. The horse's head came up sharply, nostrils flaring. Caleb felt the animal's muscles tense beneath him. Following the horse's gaze, he saw them, dark smears against the pale sand. Blood drops, leading away from the trail. Caleb dismounted, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. The blood was fresh, still crimson against the earth. Too much for an injured animal. He followed the trail cautiously, leading dust by the reins. The drops became a small stream, then larger patches soaking into the thirsty ground. Around a bend in the trail, partially hidden by a cluster of barrel cactus, he found her. A young woman lay crumpled on her side, one arm extended as if reaching for something beyond her grasp. Her black hair spilled across the sand like spilled ink. The source of the blood was immediately apparent, a deep gash across her thigh, the fabric of her traditional dress torn and saturated with crimson. Caleb approached slowly, scanning the surrounding landscape for others. The woman's chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. She was alive, but barely. As he knelt beside her, her eyes flickered open. Dark as obsidian, they regarded him with a mixture of fear and defiance. She was Apache, her features marked by the distinctive high cheekbones and strong jawline. Despite her injured state, dignity emanated from her like heat from stone. She tried to speak, the words coming out in her native tongue. Caleb shook, his head indicating he didn't understand. When he reached toward her, she flinched away, her face contorting with pain at the movement. "I won't hurt you," he said, knowing she likely couldn't understand his words any more than he had understood hers. But something in his tone must have reached her, for when he moved again to examine her wound, she remained still, watching him, with wary eyes. The gash was deep, the edges ragged. Without treatment, infection would set in quickly in this heat. Death would follow, slow and agonizing. Caleb met her gaze again, communicating through look what words could not convey. He pointed to dust, then to the direction of his ranch, making a cradling motion with his arms. For a long moment, the woman stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. With gentle movements, Caleb tore a strip from his own shirt and bound the wound to slow the bleeding. When he lifted her, she was lighter than he expected, her body burning with fever. She made no sound as he placed her carefully across Dust's back, though beads of sweat formed on her brow from the effort of containing her pain. As Caleb mounted behind her, securing her with one arm while he took the reins with the other, he felt a prickling sensation at the back of his neck, the feeling of being watched. He scanned the ridge above them, the twisted juniper trees, the shadows between rocks, nothing. Yet as he turned Dust toward home, the sensation remained. Eyes, unseen but present, followed their progress across the sun-scorched land. The afternoon stretched endlessly as Caleb tended to the woman. He had laid her on Martha's side of the bed, the incongruity of it striking him only after he had done so. The stranger's dark hair spread across Martha's pillow like a shadow, and for a moment Caleb stood frozen, feeling as though he had committed some unnameable betrayal. But practicality overcame sentiment. He cleaned the wound with whiskey, his weathered hands working with unexpected gentleness. The woman remained conscious throughout, her eyes fixed on him with unwavering intensity. She made no sound beyond the occasional sharp intake of breath when pain overcame her stoicism. The gash required stitches. Caleb retrieved Martha's sewing kit from the chest at the foot of the bed, selecting the finest needle. The woman watched his preparations, her expression revealing nothing. "This will hurt," he said, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. He held up the needle, demonstrating the stitching motion in the air. She nodded once, then turned her face away, fixing her gaze on the window where late afternoon light painted patterns on the wall. When the needle pierced her skin, her body tensed, but no cry escaped her lips. Only the whitening of her knuckles as she gripped the quilt betrayed her pain. Caleb worked methodically, each stitch placed with care. The wound was deep but clean, the edges coming together neatly under his attention. As he tied off the final knot, he noticed the woman's hands had relaxed, her breathing steadier. Exhaustion had claimed her, pulling her into the mercy of unconsciousness. For the first time, Caleb studied her face without the barrier of her watchful gaze. She was younger than he had initially thought, perhaps in her mid-20s. Her features held a quiet strength, evident even in repose. A small scar traced the edge of her left eyebrow, the only imperfection on her smooth skin. Around her neck hung a small leather pouch decorated with intricate beadwork. Some kind of medicine bag or talisman, he guessed. He had seen similar items in trading posts, though never with such fine craftsmanship. Caleb covered her with a light blanket, then retreated to the kitchen. The simple act of preparing food, slicing jerky into a pot of beans, adding wild onions and the last of Martha's dried herbs, grounded him in normalcy even as the day's events swirled in his mind like dust devils. Why was an Apache woman, clearly from one of the local tribes, alone and injured so far from her people? The wound had been caused by a blade, not an accident or animal attack. Who had harmed her, and why? And perhaps most pressing, would her people come looking for her? Relations between settlers and the Apache had been relatively peaceful in this region for several years, but memories ran deep on both sides. Old grievances could ignite like brushfire with the smallest spark. As darkness fell, Caleb lit the oil lamp and returned to the bedroom. The woman had not moved, her breathing deep, and even now. He placed a cup of water on the small table beside the bed, then hesitated, uncertain what more he could do. Martha would have known. She had nursed him through fever and injury more times than he could count, her hands cool against his brow, her voice a soothing current, pulling him back from dark waters. "The body knows how to heal itself," she would say. "We just need to give it time and respect." Caleb settled into the rocking chair in the corner of the room, the rifle across his knees, more habit than intention. As the night deepened, the rhythmic creak of the chair joined the woman's soft breathing and the distant call of coyotes in a strange, discordant lullaby. He must have dozed, for he woke with a start to find the first grey light of dawn seeping through the window. The woman was awake, propped slightly against the pillows, her dark eyes regarding him with the same inscrutable expression. Caleb straightened, setting aside the rifle. He gestured to the cup of water, now room temperature. The woman's gaze followed his movement, but she made no attempt to reach for it. Moving slowly, telegraphing his intentions, Caleb approached the bed. He lifted the cup and offered it to her. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, something unreadable passing behind her eyes. Then, with deliberate movement, she accepted the cup, her fingers brushing against his. Their eyes met over this simple exchange, and something shifted in the space between them. subtle as air currents changing direction, significant as water appearing in parched earth. She drank carefully, then returned the empty cup to him. Without a word, in the silence that followed, understanding bloomed like a night cactus flower, rare and unexpected. They shared no language, yet in that moment, a form of communication more ancient than words passed between them, an acknowledgement of life offered and accepted, of trust, fragile but present. Caleb nodded once, then turned away to begin the day's work. As he reached the doorway, he paused, looking back. "Caleb," he said, placing his hand on his chest. "Caleb Holt." The woman tilted her head slightly, considering. Then, mirroring his gesture, she placed her palm against her heart. "Anna," she said, her voice low and clear, breaking the silence like the first raindrops on dusty earth. The days fell into a rhythm, marked by small progressions. Anna's fever broke on the second night. By the third day, she could sit upright without assistance. On the fourth, Caleb found her standing by the bedroom window when he brought her breakfast, her weight carefully balanced on her uninjured leg. They communicated through gesture and expression, occasionally supplemented by single words from their respective languages. Caleb would point to an object and name it in English. Anna would respond with the Apache word. These exchanges were brief but laden with importance, bridges being built one plank at a time across a vast divide. Caleb continued his daily routine, tending the ranch while regularly checking on his unexpected guest. When not occupied with chores, he found himself drawn back to the house, curious about this woman who had disrupted his solitude, yet somehow made the silence less oppressive. It was during one such return, the midday sun at its zenith, that Caleb noticed the reflection. A brief, sharp glint from the northern ridge, there and gone in an instant. The kind of light that comes from sunlight striking metal or glass. He paused, hand instinctively moving to the revolver at his hip. His eyes scanned the ridgeline, seeking movement or shape among the rocks and scattered vegetation. Nothing appeared, yet he knew with certainty they were being watched. That evening, as shadows lengthened across the yard, Caleb sat on the porch cleaning his rifle. His movements were unhurried, but his attention remained fixed on the distant hills. Twice more he had caught that telltale flash. Whoever watched them was making no particular effort to remain hidden, which carried its own message. Through the open door, he could hear Anna moving carefully around the kitchen. She had insisted, through determined gestures, on helping prepare the evening meal. Now the scent of cornmeal and beans cooking drifted out to him, mingling with the desert air. The domesticity of it struck him with unexpected force. For months he had eaten quickly, mechanically, food serving as mere sustenance rather than comfort. The simple act of sharing a meal prepared by another's hands had become foreign to him. "They're out there," he said aloud, though Anna was too far away to hear. "Your people, I'm guessing." The statement hung in the air, unanswered, save for the lonely call of a mourning dove. Caleb continued his methodical cleaning of the rifle, the familiar actions requiring no thought. Martha would have had an opinion about all this. She had possessed an uncanny intuition about people's intentions, seeing beyond words to the heart of matters. "Most men telegraph their true selves," she would say. "You just need to know how to read the signs." Caleb finished with the rifle and set it aside. The sun balanced on the edge of the horizon, the sky aflame with colors no painter could capture. In that moment of transition from day to night, the veil between worlds seemed to thin. He could almost feel Martha beside him, her presence as tangible as the weathered boards beneath him. "What would you do?" he whispered. The answer came not in words, but in memory. Martha extending her hand to an Apache woman at a trading post, offering a blanket when she noticed the woman's child shivering in the unexpected cold of an early autumn day. The simple gesture transcending The barrier of language, speaking directly to shared humanity. Caleb stood, decision made. He walked to the corral where dust grazed peacefully in the fading light. From a hook on the post hung a small brass bell that Martha had used to call him in from the fields for dinner. He removed it, weighing the silent metal in his palm. Returning to the porch, he hung the bell from a nail by the door, positioning it so it would be visible from the distant ridge. Then he struck it once with the handle of his knife, the clear tone ringing out across the stillness. He waited, watching the darkening landscape. Minutes passed, stretching toward the first appearance of stars. Then, just as he began to think his gesture had gone unnoticed or misunderstood, it came. A single flash of light from the ridge, brief but unmistakable. Acknowledgement. Caleb nodded to himself, understanding the message that had been exchanged. I know you are there. You know I know. We will both wait and watch. Inside, he found Anna setting 2 plates on the table. She looked up at his entrance, her expression questioning. Caleb gestured toward the window, then to the distant hills. Your people, he said, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping she would grasp his meaning. Anna moved to the window, her step still careful, but growing stronger each day. She gazed out at the darkened landscape for a long moment, then turned back to Caleb. Her face revealed nothing, but her eyes held a complexity of emotion he couldn't begin to decipher. She returned to the table and seated herself, indicating the place across from her. Caleb joined her. The simple act of sitting down to a shared meal suddenly weighted with significance. They ate in silence, but it was a different quality of silence than before, expectant rather than empty, like the desert before rain. Morning arrived veiled in rare mist. The desert transformed into a landscape of ghostly shapes and muted colors. Caleb moved through his chores with one eye always on the ridge, but no reflection betrayed the presence of watchers today. The fog provided perfect concealment, a fact that left him uneasy. When he returned to the house, he found Anna seated at the kitchen table, her injured leg propped on a stool. Before her lay Martha's mending basket, its contents spread across the worn wooden surface. She looked up at his entrance, her expression questioning, as if seeking permission. Caleb felt a moment's resistance. These were Martha's things, untouched since her passing, but the practicality that had governed his life reasserted itself. The clothes needed mending, Anna needed occupation during her recovery. He nodded his assent. Anna selected a shirt with a torn sleeve, her fingers moving deftly as she threaded a needle. Caleb hesitated, then seated himself across from her. He pulled out his pocket knife and a small piece of juniper wood he had been idly carving in the evenings. They worked in companionable silence, the only sounds the soft scrape of knife against wood and the occasional snip of scissors. Outside, the mist began to lift, sunlight breaking through in scattered beams that painted patterns on the floor. After a time, Anna paused in her sewing. She reached for the leather pouch that hung around her neck, untying it carefully. From within, she withdrew a small object and placed it on the table between them. It was a carved stone, no larger than a walnut, shaped into the form of a bear. The craftsmanship was exquisite, each curve and plane capturing the essence of the animal in simplified form. The stone itself was a deep green, shot through with veins of darker material. Caleb set aside his carving and picked up the bear, turning it in his calloused fingers. The stone was cool and smooth, its weight satisfying in his palm. He looked up to find Anna watching him intently. "Bear," he said, making a gesture with his free hand to indicate size and strength. Anna nodded, then repeated the word in her own language. She extended her hand, and Caleb returned the carving. She held it for a moment, her thumb tracing its contours in what seemed a habitual gesture, then carefully replaced it in the pouch. The exchange had been brief but significant, a deliberate sharing of something valued. Caleb felt an obligation to respond in kind. He rose and crossed to a small shelf near the fireplace, returning with a weathered leather case. From within, he removed a pocket watch, its silver case engraved with intricate scrollwork. "My father's," he said, opening the case to reveal the face, the hands frozen at 3:17. The watch had stopped working years ago, but he had kept it, a connection to a past that sometimes felt more distant than the stars. Anna accepted it carefully, her dark eyes studying the mechanism inside. She ran her finger lightly over the engraving, then returned it to Caleb with a solemn nod that somehow conveyed understanding of the object's significance. As he returned the watch to its case, Caleb noticed Anna's attention shift to the window. Following her gaze, he saw what had caught her eye, a red-tailed hawk circling lazily above the corral, its wings catching the morning light. "Hawk," he said, pointing. Anna watched the bird for a moment longer, then made a gesture with her hands, arms extended, fingers spread to mimic wings, then a graceful movement, suggesting flight. The pantomime was so expressive that Caleb found himself smiling. He responded with his own gesture for horse, mimicking holding reins and bouncing slightly as if riding. Anna's eyes lit with understanding, and she nodded, adding a sound effect that perfectly captured a horse's whinny. This exchange began a new form of communication between them. Throughout the day, as they moved about their tasks, they would point to objects and exchange not only words, but gestures. By evening, they had created a rudimentary language of hands, enabling more complex concepts to be shared. During supper, Anna pointed to the scar on Caleb's forearm, raising her eyebrows in question. Caleb set down his fork and demonstrated with gestures, a young horse, wild and frightened, rearing up, hooves striking, the pain, the blood, Martha binding the wound. At the mention of Martha, conveyed by pointing to the empty chair and then making a woman's shape in the air, Caleb's hands faltered. Grief, never far beneath the surface, welled up unexpectedly. He lowered his hands to the table, unable to continue. Anna watched him with those fathomless dark eyes. After a moment, she reached across the table and placed her hand briefly atop his, the first time she had initiated physical contact. The touch was light, almost imperceptible, yet it anchored him to the present moment like a weight. She withdrew her hand and made a new gesture. Fingers pressed to her heart, then extended toward him, palm up. The meaning was unmistakable, even without words. "I understand your loss. I hold space for your grief." Caleb nodded, throat too tight for speech, even if she could have understood him. In that moment, something shifted between them. A deepening of connection forged, not despite their differences, but through them. Two people from worlds apart, finding common ground in the universal language of humanity. As darkness claimed the land outside, they continued their silent conversation, hands shaping meaning in the warm light of the oil lamp. And for the first time in months, Caleb felt the faintest stirring of something he had thought lost forever. A sense of possibility, as fragile and precious as water in the desert. The peace of the following days was shattered by the arrival of strangers. Caleb had ridden out to check the western boundary, leaving Anna at the ranch with strict instructions, conveyed through their developing sign language, to remain inside. Her wound was healing well, but she still moved with careful deliberation, favoring her injured leg. He was halfway back when he saw the dust cloud rising from the direction of the main road. Riders, moving fast. Too many for casual travelers, too purposeful for a chance passing. Caleb spurred dust to a gallop, cutting across a dry wash to intercept the approaching group before they reached the ranch house. As he crested a small rise, he counted 6 men on horseback, their mounts lathered with sweat from hard riding. His hand moved instinctively to his rifle, secured in its scabbard beside the saddle. The lead rider spotted him and raised a hand, signaling the others to halt. Caleb approached cautiously, taking in the details with the practiced eye of a man who had lived too long in wild country to trust easily. The men were trail-worn and dusty, their clothes speaking of long travel. All were armed, revolvers visible at their hips, rifles secured to their saddles. "Afternoon," the leader called as Caleb drew near. He was older than the others, perhaps 50, with a weathered face partially hidden beneath a graying beard. His eyes, sharp and assessing, reminded Caleb of a hawk's. "Name's Harlan Wade. These are my associates." Caleb reined in dust a cautious distance away. "Caleb Holt. This is my land you're crossing." Wade nodded, unperturbed by the implicit challenge in Caleb's tone. "Headed to Tucson. Heard there might be a shorter route through these parts." The explanation was reasonable enough, yet something about it rang false to Caleb's ear. The men were too alert, their eyes scanning the landscape with too much interest for simple travelers. And they carried more firepower than necessary for the relatively peaceful territory. "Main roads safer," Caleb replied. "These trails can be treacherous if you don't know them well." Wade's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We appreciate the concern, Mr. Holt, but we're experienced riders." He gestured vaguely westward. "That your place up ahead?" "It is." Caleb shifted slightly, positioning dust to block their direct path to the ranch. "Not much there for visitors, I'm afraid. Just a simple working ranch." A younger man with a pockmarked face leaned forward in his saddle. "Heard tell there's a spring on this property. Clean water's hard to come by in these parts." Caleb nodded slowly. The spring was one of the reasons he and Martha had chosen this land decades ago, a rare blessing in the arid landscape. "You're welcome to fill your canteens before moving on." Wade exchanged glances with the others, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Generous of you, Mr. Holt. Lead the way." The ride back to the ranch was tense, Caleb acutely aware of the men behind him. Their presence felt like a storm front moving in, charged with potential violence. He prayed that Anna had heeded his instruction to remain inside. As they approached the ranch house, Caleb saw with relief that there was no sign of her. The place looked as it always did, weathered, solitary, unremarkable except for the careful maintenance that spoke of long habitation. He dismounted by the well, gesturing for the men to do the same. "Help yourselves. Plenty of water." While the younger men filled their canteens, Wade wandered toward the house, his gaze sweeping over the structure with too much interest for Caleb's comfort. "Lived here long?" Wade asked, his tone conversational. 30 years come October." Wade nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "Fine piece of land, especially with that spring." He turned, fixing Caleb with a direct stare. "Ever have trouble with the local tribes?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. Caleb maintained a neutral expression, even as his instincts sharpened to high alert. "Can't say that I have. They keep to themselves, I keep to mine." Wade's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting. We had an encounter with some Apache a few days back, north of here. Seemed mighty territorial." "It's their land," Caleb said simply. "Has been for generations." A flicker of something, annoyance perhaps, or a darker emotion, crossed Wade's face. Before he could respond, one of the younger men called out from the corral, "Boss, look at this." Wade moved toward the corral, Caleb following with measured steps. The young man was pointing at hoofprints in the soft earth, the distinctive track of Dust's left front hoof, which had a unique chip in the shoe. Beside it, barely visible, was a partial footprint. Small, unmistakably human. Caleb felt a chill that had nothing to do with the late afternoon breeze. The tracks had been made when he had returned from finding Anna, carrying her wounded form across Dust's back. Too much time had passed for him to erase them now without drawing more suspicion. Wade crouched, studying the prints with too much interest for a casual traveler. "Seems you've had company, Mr. Holt." Caleb shrugged, aiming for nonchalance. Get all sorts passing through. Prospectors, drifters. I offer water to those in need. Wade straightened, his eyes hard and knowing. Charitable of you. The tension between them stretched taut as a bowstring. The other men had gathered now, forming a loose semicircle. Their hands rested near their weapons in a manner too casual to be coincidence. The moment was broken by the youngest of the group, hardly more than a boy, who had wandered to the edge of the property. "Riders coming," he called, pointing to the northern ridge. Caleb turned to see 3 figures on horseback, silhouetted against the sky. Even at this distance, their identity was unmistakable. Apache warriors, watching the scene below with the stillness of predators. Wade's hand moved to his revolver. "Friends of yours, Holt." "Neighbors," Caleb replied evenly. "As I said, we keep to ourselves." For a long, tense moment, Wade seemed to consider his options. The Apache remained, motionless on the ridge, their presence both a question and a warning. Finally, Wade gestured to his men. "Mount up. We've taken enough of Mr. Holt's time." The relief Caleb felt was tempered by the knowledge that this was merely a reprieve, not a resolution. As the men swung into their saddles, Wade paused beside him. "We'll be in the area a while," he said, his voice pitched low for Caleb's ears only. "Tucson can wait. This land has opportunities worth exploring." The threat was veiled, but unmistakable. Wade touched the brim of his hat in mocking. "Salute!" then spurred his horse toward the main trail, his men following in a cloud of dust. Caleb watched them go, his mind racing. When he looked back to the ridge, the Apache warriors had vanished as silently as they had appeared, leaving only questions in their wake. Inside the house, he found Anna crouched by the window, a kitchen, knife clutched in her hand. Her eyes were wide with a fear he hadn't seen since the day he found her wounded on the trail. Without words, he understood. These men, Wade and his associates, were connected to her injury, to her presence alone in the desert. The realization solidified his resolve. Whatever storm was coming, he would not face it alone. And neither would she. The day after Wade's visit, Anna's demeanor changed. The wariness that had defined her in their early days together returned, her movements tense, her gaze constantly drawn to the windows. She spoke more in her native tongue, urgent phrases that Caleb couldn't understand but recognized as warnings. His attempts at reassurance through their makeshift sign language fell short. The threat Wade represented transcended their limited ability to communicate. Frustration mounted between them like a wall. It was Anna who found the solution. That evening, as Caleb sat at the kitchen table cleaning his revolver, a task that had become ritual rather than necessity in recent days, she approached with Martha's old slate board, once used for household inventories and occasional letters. Anna placed the slate before him, along with a piece of chalk. She pointed to it, then to herself, then to him, her expression intent. Caleb understood immediately. Drawing, pictures, a bridge between languages. He nodded, setting aside the gun parts. Anna seated herself across from him, watching expectantly as he took up the chalk. Caleb began with simple images: the sun, a horse, the ranch house. Anna nodded at each, supplying the Apache word while he provided the English equivalent. They progressed to more complex concepts, time shown through the position of the sun, numbers indicated by dots, direction by arrows. When he drew Wade's group approaching the ranch, Anna's expression darkened. She took the chalk from him and added to his drawing. 6 men, but behind them a larger group. Many more men, many more guns. Her meaning was clear. Wade was merely the vanguard of a greater threat. Caleb pointed to her wounded leg, then to the men in the drawing, raising his eyebrows in question. Anna nodded grimly. She erased part of the slate with her palm, then drew a new scene. What appeared to be a canyon, figures moving through it. Some fallen, blood indicated by harsh, dark strokes. An ambush. Caleb felt cold certainty settle in his gut. Wade and his men had attacked her people, perhaps a hunting party or travelers. Anna had escaped wounded in the process, only to collapse on the trail where he had found her. He pointed to the drawing, then to the northern ridge, questioning whether her tribe knew what had happened. Anna's response was a slow nod, her eyes holding his with grim certainty. The pieces fell into place. The watchers on the ridge, their careful observation rather than immediate action. They were assessing him, determining whether he was ally or enemy before making their next move. Caleb erased the slate again and drew a new image. The ranch house, with figures inside and around it. Apache and settler together. Then, at a distance, Wade's men. His meaning was clear. We stand together. Anna studied the drawing for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate movement, she took the chalk from his hand. Her fingers brushed against his, the contact brief but electric. She added to his drawing. More Apache figures on the ridges surrounding the ranch, positioned as sentinels. Then she drew a simple symbol between the house and the Apache figures. A bridge. Caleb stared at the completed image, understanding flowering in his mind. Not just alliance against a common enemy, but connection, communication, trust. He met Anna's gaze and saw in her dark eyes the same recognition. This moment transcended their immediate danger, reaching towards something neither had anticipated. When he found her, bleeding in the desert, Anna set down the chalk and extended her hand across the table, palm up. An invitation, a question. Caleb hesitated only briefly before placing his hand in hers. Her skin was warm and smooth against his weathered palm. Her fingers closed around his, the grip firm and unafraid. In that simple touch, a covenant was sealed. Whatever came next, they would face it not as strangers thrown together by circumstance, but as allies bound by choice. Outside, the first. Stars appeared in the darkening sky. Inside, in the warm glow of lamplight, two people from different worlds bent their heads over a slate board, building a bridge of words and images across the chasm of their differences. 3 days after Wade's visit, as dawn painted the eastern sky in bands of gold and crimson, they arrived. Caleb was in the corral, dust saddled and ready for his morning ride, when he spotted them. A group of 8 Apache horsemen approaching from the north, moving at a deliberate pace. He remained where he stood, one hand resting on Dust's neck, the other hanging loose at his side, neither reaching for a weapon nor raising in greeting. Waiting. Watching, his heart hammered against his ribs, but his exterior remained calm. Years of frontier life having taught him the value of patience in uncertain moments. The riders stopped at the edge of his property, maintaining a respectful distance. Their leader, a tall man with grey streaks in his long black hair, raised his hand, in a gesture that was neither threatening nor entirely welcoming. An acknowledgement, nothing more. From inside the house, Anna appeared at the door. She had been watching, waiting for this moment. Now she moved forward with as much dignity as her healing leg allowed, her back straight, her chin lifted. She wore one of Martha's old dresses, modified to fit her smaller frame, but around her neck hung her medicine pouch, a visible connection to her heritage. She spoke to the riders in her native tongue, her voice clear and carrying across the yard. Caleb couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone, authoritative, assured. This was not a prisoner reporting to rescuers, but a woman of status addressing her people. The leader of the group dismounted, approaching on foot. Up close, Caleb could see the intricate patterns painted on his face, not war paint, but symbols of authority. His bearing spoke of natural command, tempered by wisdom. Ina gestured to Caleb, then to the house, clearly explaining her presence here. The man listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. When she finished, he turned his attention to Caleb, studying him with penetrating, dark eyes. "I am Natsan," he said in accented but clear English, "chief of the Shadow Water people, father of Anna." Caleb fought to keep his surprise from showing on his face. The chief's daughter. He had been harboring the child of an Apache leader, a fact that carried significant political weight in this territory. "Caleb Holt," he replied, inclining his head slightly. "Your daughter has been welcome in my home." Natsan's gaze moved past Caleb to the ranch house, taking in the modest structure and well-maintained grounds. "She tells me you found her wounded, that you healed her. I did what anyone would do." A flicker of something, perhaps amusement, crossed Natsan's face. "Not anyone, Caleb Holt. Many would have left her, or worse." He gestured to the house. "May we speak inside? There are matters we must discuss." The request was unexpected. Apache leaders did not typically seek counsel in white men's dwellings. The significance of the gesture was not lost on Caleb. "You and your men are welcome," he said, matching the formality of Natsan's tone. The chief turned and spoke to his warriors. All but two dismounted, the remaining riders apparently tasked with keeping watch. Caleb led the way into his home, acutely aware of how strange it must seem to these men, the unfamiliar furnishings, the enclosed spaces so different from their traditional dwellings. In the main room, Anna had already begun preparations, clearing the large table and setting out cups for coffee. Her ease of movement around his kitchen spoke of the days spent recuperating here, learning the placement of items, adapting to his ways even as he had begun to learn hers. Once seated, Natsan came directly to the point. "The men who came to your ranch 3 days ago, you know them?" Caleb shook his head. "Never saw them before. Their leader called himself Harlan Wade." Natsan exchanged glances with the warrior beside him, a younger man with a distinctive scar across his jawline. "These men attacked our hunting party in the Red Canyon. Without warning, without cause. 5 of our people were wounded. 2 died." The blunt statement hung in the air, heavy with implication. In previous decades, such an attack would have led to immediate retaliation, perpetuating the cycle of violence that had stained the territory's history. Yet here sat the Apache chief, seeking discourse rather than revenge. "I'm sorry for your losses," Caleb said, the words inadequate but sincere. "What do these men want?" "Land," Natsan replied simply. "Water. The spring on your property is known for its purity and reliability, even in the driest seasons. And there are rumors of silver in the hills to the west." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intent. "Wade and his men are not simply passing through. They are scouts for a larger group, men who take what they want and destroy what they cannot take." Caleb absorbed this information, connecting it with his own observations of Wade's group, their excessive armaments, their too casual interest in his property, their veiled threats. The picture forming was grim. "Why come to me?" he asked. "Why not handle this threat yourselves?" Natsan's expression remained impassive, but his voice carried a new weight. "The territorial governor has warned that any conflict between Apache and settlers will be met with military intervention, no matter who began it, no matter who is right." His hands, resting on the table, curled into fists. "We have seen what happens when the army comes. We cannot risk our people." The truth of this statement was undeniable. The army's campaigns against various Apache bands had been brutal and indiscriminate, failing to distinguish between peaceful groups and those in active resistance. "So what do you propose?" Caleb asked. Anna, who had been silent throughout the exchange, spoke, now in her native tongue. Her father listened, then nodded slowly. "My daughter suggests an alliance," Natsan said. "Your ranch lies between our territory and the main road. If Wade's men come in force, They must pass through here first. He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. Together, we might dissuade them without bloodshed. Separate, we are both vulnerable. The proposition was as unexpected as it was unprecedented. Settlers and Apache working in concert against a common threat, putting aside generations of mistrust for mutual protection. Caleb's gaze moved from Natsan to Anna, seeing in her expression both hope and determination. She had built the first bridge between their worlds during her days of recovery. Now she proposed expanding that connection into something that could save both their peoples. Martha's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, as clear as if she sat beside him. The land remembers, Caleb. It remembers kindness as well as cruelty. Every choice leaves its mark. He made his decision. I'll stand with you, he said, meeting Natsan's gaze directly. But we'll need more than just an agreement between us. We need a plan. For the first time, Natsan smiled, a brief expression that transformed his stern features. Yes, a plan. He turned to his warriors, speaking rapid Apache. One of them produced a folded piece of leather, which when opened revealed a map drawn on deerskin, showing the territory in remarkable detail. As they bent over the map, discussing defensive positions and observation points, Caleb felt something he had not experienced since Martha's death. A sense of purpose that transcended mere survival. In the face of threat, two peoples who had long regarded each other with suspicion were finding common ground. From the doorway, Anna watched the men confer, her expression a complex mixture of hope and apprehension. When Caleb glanced up, their eyes met across the room. In that moment of connection, unspoken understanding passed between them. Whatever came next would change everything, for better or worse. Outside, the sun climbed higher in the sky, illuminating a landscape that had witnessed centuries of conflict. Perhaps now, in this unlikely council of two worlds, the seeds of something new were being planted in that ancient soil. The attack, when it came, arrived not with the thunder of hooves or battle cries, but with deceptive calm. 10 days after the council at Caleb's ranch, Wade returned. This time he brought 20 men. They approached in late afternoon when the sinking sun cast long shadows across the land. The Apache sentinels on the ridges had provided ample warning, using a system of smoke signals to alert Caleb and the small group of warriors concealed nearby. Caleb waited on his porch, rifle visible but not aimed. An old tactic: show strength without direct threat. Display readiness without provocation. The approaching riders formed a loose semicircle before the house, Wade at the center. Afternoon? Holt, Wade called, his tone falsely genial. Thought we'd take you up on that water offer again. Caleb remained seated, his posture deliberately relaxed despite the tension coiling within him. 20's a lot of men for a social call, Wade. Wade's smile didn't reach his eyes. Times are dangerous. Smart men travel in numbers. He gestured expansively. We've been exploring the territory, found some interesting opportunities. His gaze fixed on Caleb, calculating. In fact, that's why we're here. I'd like to make you an offer for this land. The directness of the approach was surprising, though the intent behind it was not. Caleb had expected threats, perhaps intimidation tactics. Instead, Wade was attempting the veneer of legitimate business. Not interested in selling, Caleb replied evenly. This land's not for sale. Not now, not ever. A murmur ran through Wade's men, their leader's expression hardened, the pretense of civility cracking. That's not wise, Holt. I'm offering fair compensation, more than fair considering the isolation out here. My answer stands. Wade dismounted, approaching the porch steps. 2 of his men followed, hands resting near their weapons. The tension in the air thickened, almost palpable. Let me be clear, Wade said, his voice lowered but carrying an edge sharp as a blade. This land will be mine, one way or another. The spring, the access to the northern valley, the mineral rights. You're one man, Holt, one old man standing in the way of progress. Caleb rose slowly to his feet, his rifle held loosely across his body. I'm not alone, Wade. A bark of laughter escaped the older man. Your Apache friends, he spat into the dust. They won't help you. They're watching out for themselves, same as anyone. Are you certain of that? Caleb asked quietly. Something in his tone must have registered with Wade, for the man's confidence faltered slightly. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the surrounding landscape with greater attention. It was at that precise moment that Natsan emerged from behind the house, 5 warriors with him. They moved with the silent grace that had made Apache fighters legendary, seeming to materialize from empty air. Simultaneously, on the ridge above, 8 more warriors appeared, bows drawn, arrows nocked. The sudden reversal of power was as complete as it was unexpected. Wade's men reacted immediately, reaching for weapons. Hold! Wade barked, his command cutting through the chaos before it could erupt into violence. His eyes, cold with fury, fixed on Caleb. You've made your choice, then, siding with savages against your own kind. My own kind, Caleb echoed, genuine puzzlement in his voice. My kind are people who respect the land and each other, who don't ambush hunting parties or threaten peaceful ranchers. He gestured to Natsan, who now stood beside him. The chief and I have reached an understanding. This territory will be shared peacefully. There's no place here for men like you. Wade's face contorted with rage, but his survival instinct clearly outweighed his anger. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered. This isn't over, Holt, he said, his voice a low growl. You've made a mistake you'll live to regret. Both of you. His gaze included Natsan in the threat. The Apache chief's response was calm, spoken in perfect English. The mistake would be returning, Wade. My people know your faces now. Every trail, every pass, every waterhole in this territory is watched. Leave and do not come back. For a long, breathless moment, violence hung in the balance. Then Wade backed down, his movements stiff with suppressed fury. He mounted his horse in a single fluid motion, his men following suit with clear relief. Remember what I said, Holt, he called as they departed. This isn't over. They watched until the dust cloud of the departing riders vanished into the distance. Only then did Caleb allow his shoulders to relax, the weight of potential bloodshed lifting. Natsan turned to him, his expression grave. He speaks truth in one thing. This is not over. Men like Wade do not surrender their desires easily. Caleb nodded, knowing the chief was right. We'll be ready. From the doorway of the house, Anna appeared. She had insisted on being present, though hidden inside until the danger passed. Now she moved to join them, her steps strong and sure. Her injury healed enough for easy movement. The 3 stood together, silhouetted against the setting sun, an image that would have seemed impossible mere weeks before. Apache chief, his daughter, and an aging settler united in common purpose. What comes next? Caleb asked, the question directed to both father and daughter. It was Anna who answered, her English halting but clear, words learned during her recovery. We build together. Natsan nodded, approval evident in his expression. Yes, together. He extended his hand to Caleb, the gesture both solemn and significant. 2 peoples, 1 land. Caleb clasped the offered hand, feeling the strength in the other man's grip. 2 peoples, 1 land, he repeated, the words carrying the weight of promise. As they stood there, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, silent witnesses to this unlikely covenant. The future remained uncertain, fraught with potential conflict. Yet in that moment, hope seemed as tangible as the earth beneath their feet. The weeks following Wade's retreat unfolded in a rhythm of vigilant peace. The Apache maintained their watch on the surrounding territory, while Caleb focused on strengthening the ranch's defenses. What had begun as an alliance of necessity gradually evolved into something more profound, a genuine collaboration between peoples long separated by mistrust. Early mornings often found Natsan and Caleb seated on the porch, sharing coffee as they discussed recent developments. The Apache chief had revealed himself to be not only a skilled strategist, but a thoughtful leader, deeply concerned with finding a path forward for his people in a changing world. "The old ways are valuable," he told Caleb one such morning, his eyes on the distant mountains. "But they alone cannot sustain us. We must learn to navigate between worlds without losing ourselves." Una, fully recovered now, divided her time between the ranch and her people's camp, serving as a living bridge between the two communities. Her facility with English grew daily, matched by Caleb's increasing grasp of basic Apache phrases. Their conversations, once limited to gestures and drawings, had blossomed into genuine dialogue, rich with the exchange of ideas and experiences. On a particularly fine autumn day, Anna arrived at the ranch accompanied by 3 women from her tribe. They carried baskets of seeds and seedlings, desert plants with medicinal properties, hardy vegetables adapted to the harsh climate, flowers that could survive with minimal water. Without ceremony, they began planting these offerings around Caleb's house, transforming the sparse yard into the beginning of a garden. Caleb watched from the corral where he was mending a fence, struck by the sight. Martha had always wanted a proper garden, but the demands of ranch life had made it seem an unattainable luxury. Now these women, strangers until recently, were turning that wish into reality. When Anna approached him later, he struggled to express his gratitude, the emotion catching in his throat. She seemed to understand without words, nodding as she pressed a small pouch of seeds into his hand. "For memory," she said simply, "and for future." The seeds were evening primrose, she explained, a plant whose golden blooms opened at sunset and closed with the morning light. They symbolized resilience, beauty that thrived in harsh conditions, life persisting despite challenges. Caleb planted them beneath Martha's window, where the evening sun would catch their blooms. As he worked the soil, he found himself speaking to Martha as if she could hear, telling her of recent events, of the unexpected turns his life had taken. The one-sided conversation brought comfort rather than pain, a connection preserved rather than severed. The transformation extended beyond the physical boundaries of the ranch. Word spread through the territory of the unusual alliance. Curious, settlers from neighboring homesteads visited, initially wary but increasingly open to the possibilities demonstrated by Caleb's example. Trading increased, knowledge was exchanged, stereotypes began to erode in the face of direct experience. Not all reactions were positive. Several families refused all contact, entrenched in beliefs that no peaceful coexistence was possible. Others viewed Caleb as a traitor to his race, a sentiment expressed through cold shoulders at the general store in the nearest town and occasional anonymous threats left at his property boundary. Wade and his men remained an unseen but palpable threat. Scouts reported their continued presence in the territory, gathering strength at a camp near the territorial road. The shadow of potential violence never fully dissipated, adding urgency to the work of building stronger connections between communities. Despite these challenges, a fragile new reality was taking root. The Apache shared their extensive knowledge of the land, where to find water in the driest season, which plants held medicinal properties, how to read the subtle signs of changing weather. In return, Caleb offered skills honed through decades of ranching: animal husbandry, fence, construction, preservation techniques for extending food supplies through winter. One evening, as autumn deepened toward winter, Caleb returned from checking the northern pasture to find an unusual gathering at the ranch. Natsan was there, along with several elders from the tribe and, surprisingly, 3 families from neighboring homesteads. They sat in a circle in the yard, engaged in earnest discussion. Sina met him at the corral, her expression animated with suppressed excitement. "They come to talk," she explained, "about working together, trading, protecting, learning." Her English, improving daily, conveyed the significance of the moment. "Chief says this place, your ranch, is becoming bridge, where people meet, not fight." Caleb unsaddled Dust, taking time with the familiar task as he absorbed her words. His isolated ranch, once a retreat from the world in the wake of Martha's death, was transforming into something he could never have envisioned. A meeting ground, a place of possibility. As he joined the circle, he felt Martha's presence more strongly than he had since her passing. She would have approved of this, he knew. She had always believed in the power of connection, of finding common ground with those different from oneself. "The land remembers," she had said. Perhaps this was what she had meant, that the choices made today would echo into the future, shaping what was possible for those who came after. The discussion continued into the evening, lit by a bonfire under the vast canopy of stars. Plans were made for mutual defense, for sharing resources through the coming winter, for establishing regular trading days. The foundations of community were being laid, stone by careful stone. Later, as the visitors departed, Anna lingered by the fire. In the flickering light, her face held a serenity Caleb had not seen before. She had changed from the wounded, wary woman he had found on the trail, just as he had changed from the isolated, grieving widower she had encountered. "Good beginning," she said, gesturing to the now empty yard where the meeting had taken place. Caleb nodded, seeing beyond the present moment to the potential future unfolding before them. "Yes," he agreed, "a good beginning." Above them the infinite desert sky wheeled with stars, ancient light reaching across vast distances. Below, in the firelit circle of human connection, something equally profound was emerging. Understanding, bridging divides once thought impassable, seeds planted in dry ground, awaiting the transformative power of rain. The territorial judge arrived on a crisp December morning, heralded by a cloud of dust on the eastern horizon. His coming had been anticipated for weeks, ever since word reached them that official inquiries were being made about the situation in their corner of the territory. Caleb stood on the porch, watching the approach of the small cavalcade. The judge's carriage, flanked by 4 mounted men, presumably legal clerks or marshals. Beside him, Natsan waited with dignified stillness, his presence a statement in itself. They had agreed that meeting the authority together as equals would set the tone for what followed. Behind them, in the ranch house, representatives from both communities prepared for the encounter. The atmosphere was tense but resolute. Too much had been built over recent months to surrender their vision without a fight. The carriage drew to a halt in the yard. A thin man in his 60s emerged, brushing dust from his formal black coat with fastidious gestures. His face, partially obscured by a neatly trimmed white beard, revealed little of his disposition as he surveyed the unusual welcoming committee. "Judge Thomas Everett," he announced, approaching the porch. His gaze moved between Caleb and Natsan, assessing. "I understand there have been irregular developments in this region." Caleb stepped forward, extending his hand. "Caleb Holt, this is Chief Natsan of the Shadow Water Apache. Welcome to Singing Rock's Ranch." The judge hesitated fractionally before accepting the handshake, his expression betraying surprise at the casual association between settler and Apache leader. "I've been sent by the territorial governor to investigate reports of unauthorized agreements between settlers and native populations, and allegations of hostility toward legitimate business interests. The phrasing confirmed what they had suspected. Wade had taken his grievances to official channels, presenting himself as the injured party. "You've heard one version of events," Natsan said, his English clear and measured. "We invite you to see the truth with your own eyes before rendering judgment." Surprise flickered across the judge's features again, perhaps at being addressed so directly by an Apache leader, perhaps at the diplomatic nature of the approach. He straightened his coat in a gesture that seemed habitual rather than necessary. "That is indeed why I am here, to observe and evaluate." His tone softened slightly. "I prefer to form my opinions based on evidence rather than hearsay, regardless of its source." Caleb nodded, allowing himself a small measure of hope. "Then you're welcome to stay as long as needed. We've prepared quarters for you and your men." The invitation clearly caught the judge off guard. He had evidently expected resistance, perhaps evasion, not open cooperation. "That would be acceptable. Thank you." What followed was a carefully orchestrated demonstration of the community they had begun to build. The judge was shown the trading system established between ranch and tribe, the shared watch rotations that protected both peoples from threats, the exchange of knowledge that had improved conditions for all. Ina played a crucial role, her ability to move between worlds, making her an ideal guide. She led the judge through the garden, where Apache medicinal plants now grew alongside traditional settler crops, explaining the properties of each with confident knowledge. She introduced him to children from both communities who had begun to learn each other's languages, their quick minds absorbing new words and concepts with natural ease. Throughout the day, Judge Everett maintained a professional reserve, asking probing questions, but revealing little of his thoughts. His clerk took copious notes, the scratching of pen on paper a constant accompaniment to their tours and discussions. The true test came that evening. A council had been arranged with representatives from all factions present, Apache elders, settler families, Caleb and Natsan as the informal leaders of this experiment in coexistence. They gathered in the large barn, cleared and prepared. For the occasion, sitting in a great circle with the judge, given a place of honor, Wade was there too, having been formally invited as the complainant. He sat stiffly at one side, flanked by two of his men, his expression thunderous as he observed the easy interaction between peoples he had sought to divide. Judge Everett opened the proceedings with formal declaration of his authority and purpose. Then, with unexpected even-handedness, he invited all parties to speak their piece, beginning with Wade. The man rose, his tall figure imposing in the lamplight. "This territory is part of the United States," he began, his voice carrying easily. "Through the barn. Its resources should be developed by American citizens, not left fallow in the hands of savages or those who consort with them." He launched into a rehearsed speech about progress, civilization, and the wasteful nature of Apache land use. When he finished, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Natsan stood, his dignity a palpable force. "We have lived on this land since before your grandfather's grandfathers crossed the Great Water," he said, his gaze steady on the judge. "We do not own the earth, we belong to it, but we understand that your law requires boundaries and papers." He gestured to where Caleb sat. "This man saved my daughter's life when Wade's men left her to die. He extended his hand when others would have turned away. Together, we have found a path that honors both our ways." One by one, others rose to speak. A settler woman who told of Apache remedies saving her child from fever. An Apache elder who described increased food security through new preservation techniques. Young men from both communities who had formed hunting partnerships, combining traditional Apache tracking with settler firearms to improve efficiency. Throughout it all, Judge Everett listened intently, his expression giving away nothing of his leanings. Wade grew increasingly agitated, interrupting several times with accusations of fabrication and sentimentality, until the judge silenced him with a sharp reprimand. The final speaker was Anna. She rose with quiet confidence, her presence commanding attention without demand. "I stand in two worlds," she began, her English careful but clear. "Once I thought this impossible. That one must choose. Be Apache, or be gone." She gestured around the circle. "Now I see different truth. We can walk together without losing our separate paths. Share wisdom without surrendering identity." Her gaze found Wade, unflinching. "Some men see only what can be taken. We have learned to see what can be built." As she resumed her seat, a murmur of approval rippled through the assembly. Even some of the judge's clerks nodded unconsciously, moved by her simple eloquence. Judge Everett rose, adjusting his spectacles with deliberate care. "I have heard enough for tonight. I will consider what has been presented and deliver my findings tomorrow. This council is adjourned." The night passed in tense anticipation. Caleb spent much of it on the porch, watching the stars wheel overhead, too restless for sleep. Anna joined him in the pre-dawn hours, wrapping herself in one of Martha's old shawls against the desert chill. They sat in companionable silence, each lost in private thoughts, yet drawing comfort from the other's presence. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Anna spoke softly. "Whatever comes, we have shown what is possible. That cannot be undone." Caleb nodded, understanding the truth in her words. Even if the judge ruled against them, the connections formed could not be severed by legal declaration. Seeds had been planted that would continue to grow, with or without official sanction. Morning brought the entire community back to the barn. Judge Everett took his place at the head of the assembly, his manner formal but not unkind. He unfolded a document and cleared his throat, the room falling into expectant silence. "After careful consideration of all testimony and my personal observations, I am prepared to render judgment on the matter before me." His voice was steady, carrying the weight of authority. "The question at hand concerns the legitimacy of arrangements between settler Caleb Holt, Apache Chief Natsan, and their respective communities, as well as claims of rightful development presented by Harlan Wade." He paused, his gaze sweeping the assembly. "American law recognizes the rights of citizens to enter into voluntary agreements for mutual benefit. It also recognizes, though imperfectly, certain sovereign rights of native peoples within their traditional territories." Wade shifted impatiently, his face darkening with anticipation of an unfavorable ruling. "What I have witnessed here," the judge continued, "is not lawlessness or improper collusion, but rather an exemplary case of peaceful coexistence that serves the broader interests of territorial stability and development." He held up the document in his hand. "I am therefore issuing an official recognition of this region as a cooperative territory to be known legally as Paz Alta, in which governance shall be shared between appointed representatives of both communities." A collective breath seemed to be released from the assembly. Caleb felt a weight lift from his shoulders, months of tension dissolving in a moment of vindication. "Mr. Holt will serve as the first registered administrator," the judge went on, "with Chief Natsan and his daughter Anna designated as official tribal representatives. All decisions affecting the territory will require consensus among these three parties." He fixed Wade with a stern gaze. "Furthermore, the claims of Mr. Wade are hereby dismissed, and he is ordered to remove himself and his associates from the territorial boundary within 48 hours. Wade surged to his feet, face contorted with rage. "This is unconscionable. I'll appeal to the governor himself." "You are welcome to do so," Judge Everett replied, unperturbed. However, my decision stands unless overturned by higher authority, and I should inform you that the governor is particularly interested in regions that maintain peace without requiring military intervention. His tone hardened. I would also caution you that any actions taken against this community, while legal, appeals are in process, would constitute serious criminal offenses. Wade's fury was palpable, but even he recognized the finality of the judgment. With a last venomous glare at Caleb and Natsan, he stormed from the barn, his men following in his wake. As the assembly dissolved into excited conversation, Judge Everett approached Caleb, Natsan, and Anna, where they stood together near the center of the room. "What you've accomplished here is remarkable," he said, his formal demeanor softening. "And frankly, unexpected. I came prepared to mediate a conflict, not to recognize a solution." He glanced around at the mixed gathering of settlers and Apache. "This could serve as a model for other regions if you're successful in the long term." Natsan inclined his head in acknowledgement. "We walk a new trail. There will be stones in the path." "Indeed," the judge agreed. "But from what I've seen, you have the wisdom to navigate them." He turned to Caleb. "The ranch makes a natural center for this community. Are you prepared for that responsibility?" Caleb considered the question seriously. His home, once a private retreat, would become a public space, a meeting ground, a place of governance and gathering. Martha would have embraced the change. Wholeheartedly, he knew. "I am," he said simply. His gaze met Anna's across the small circle. Something passed between them, understanding, respect, perhaps something more complex that neither was yet ready to name. They had moved from strangers to allies, from allies to partners in building something unprecedented. What might come next remained to be seen, a future open with possibility. Judge Everett nodded, satisfied. "Then I wish you well in your endeavor. Paz Alta." He tested the name, smiling slightly. "High Peace. May it live up to its designation." As the judge moved away to speak with others, the three new leaders of Paz Alta stood together in a moment of quiet acknowledgement. The challenge ahead was substantial, the outcome uncertain. Yet in that moment, hope seemed as tangible as the earth beneath their feet. Outside, the winter sun climbed higher in a cloudless sky, illuminating a landscape on the cusp of transformation. Spring arrived in a riot of unexpected color. The garden Anna and the women had planted around Caleb's house, now officially the administrative center of Paz Alta, burst into bloom, desert flowers spreading across what had once been bare earth. Most striking were Martha's evening primrose beneath the bedroom window, their golden blooms opening at dusk as if in quiet celebration. 4 months had passed since Judge Everett's ruling. Wade had indeed appealed to the governor, but the petition had been denied. The unusual arrangement at Paz Alta granted continued recognition as an experiment in peaceful coexistence. The man himself had departed for California, though rumors persisted that he maintained interests in the territory through intermediaries. The community had flourished in his absence. The trading post established at the ranch had grown into a small market where goods and knowledge were exchanged freely. Apache crafts, intricate beadwork, woven baskets, carved stone, found eager buyers among settlers, while manufactured items from the East became available to tribal members. Without the exploitative pricing of traditional trading posts, Caleb found himself busier than he had been in decades. His role as administrator involved mediating occasional disputes, organizing labor for projects benefiting both communities, and representing Paz Alta to visitors from surrounding territories. The work suited him better than he had expected, drawing on strengths he had developed through years of independent ranching. Natsan proved an invaluable partner in governance, his wisdom and patience complementing Caleb's practical approach. The Apache chief had moved his people's main camp closer to the ranch, establishing a permanent settlement within the boundaries of Paz Alta while maintaining seasonal camps in their traditional hunting grounds. It was Anna, however, who emerged as the heart of the community. Her unique position, daughter of the chief, fluent in both languages and cultures, respected by all factions, made her an ideal bridge between worlds. She moved with ease between the ranch and the Apache camp, resolving misunderstandings before they could fester into conflict, identifying opportunities for collaboration that others might have missed. Her relationship with Caleb had evolved as well, deepening into a partnership that defied simple categorization. Not quite family, more than friendship, founded on mutual respect and shared purpose. They worked together daily, their complementary, strengths creating a balance that served the community well. On a particularly fine April morning, Caleb sat on the porch, reviewing supply ledgers, when Anna approached from the direction of the Apache camp. She carried a small bundle wrapped in soft leather, her expression holding an unusual solemnity. "Good morning," he greeted her, setting aside his work. "Everything all right at the camp?" She nodded, seating herself in the chair beside him. "All is well. The children begin their spring learnings today." This referred to the education program they had established, where children from both communities gathered to learn from elders and teachers of both cultures. "That's good," Caleb replied, noting her thoughtful expression. "But something's on your mind." Anna smiled slightly, appreciating as always his directness. "Yes, today is an important day in my people's calendar, day of renewal." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Time when we acknowledge change, growth, new paths." She unwrapped the bundle in her lap, revealing an object that caught the morning light with unexpected brilliance. It was a necklace, a silver pendant, suspended on a braided leather cord. The pendant itself was remarkable, a blend of Apache and settler craftsmanship. At its center was one of Martha's painted stones, the one bearing a golden sunburst pattern, now set in a silver bezel, decorated with traditional Apache symbols. "I make this," Anna said softly, "for you, symbol of Paz Alta. 2 worlds, 1 art." Caleb stared at the necklace, emotion tightening his throat. The integration of Martha's stone into this new creation felt deeply significant, a connection between past and present that honored both. "It's beautiful," he managed finally. "Thank you." Anna lifted the necklace, indicating he should bow his head. When he did, she placed it around his neck, the weight of the pendant settling against his chest like a tangible promise. "You carry old love always," she said, her hand resting briefly over the pendant. "Now you carry new hope also." The simple ceremony complete, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching the activity in the yard below, where Apache and settler children chased each other in a game that borrowed elements from both cultures. Their laughter rose in the clear air, a sound that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "Martha would have loved this," Caleb said after a time, his hand unconsciously touching the pendant. "Everything we've built here. She always believed people could find common ground if they tried." Anna nodded, her gaze on the children. "She lives in what you build, in the garden, in Paz Alta." She turned to him, her dark eyes holding his, "in how you teach others to see with new eyes." The observation struck Caleb with its insight. Perhaps this was another form of legacy, not just blood descendants, but spiritual ones, people whose lives were touched and transformed by the values one embodied. "And you?" he asked. "What does Anna see in her future?" It was a question they had not directly addressed, though it had hovered unspoken between them in recent months. Anna had received marriage offers from men in both communities, all respectfully declined. Her focus had remained entirely on her role in Paz Alta's development. She considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I see path like river, Many turns ahead, not all visible from here. A small smile curved her lips. But good companions on journey. The answer was typically Anna, philosophical, yet practical, acknowledging uncertainty while embracing possibility. Caleb found himself smiling in return, appreciating once again the unexpected gift of her presence in his life. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a rider from the direction of town. The young man, barely out of his teens, dismounted with obvious excitement. "Mr. Holt, Miss Anna," he called, approaching the porch. "News from the territorial capital. Judge Everett sends word. The governor's coming to visit Paz Alta 3 weeks from now." The announcement sent ripples of both excitement and apprehension through the community when shared at an emergency council that afternoon. Such high-level attention brought opportunity, but also scrutiny. The governor's impression could either cement their status or undermine it, depending on what he witnessed. Planning began immediately. Buildings were repaired, paths improved, special demonstrations of cooperative enterprises arranged. Everyone understood the importance of presenting Paz Alta at its best. Through it all, Caleb found himself drawing strength from the pendant that now hung around his neck. In moments of doubt or fatigue, his hand would find it, drawing comfort from the tangible symbol of everything they had built together. 2 days before the governor's scheduled arrival, Anna found Caleb by the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. He sat on a flat rock, gazing into the clear water, Martha's journal open beside him. "Reading her words?" Anna asked softly, taking a seat nearby. Caleb nodded. "She wrote about this place before we even bought the land. Said it had the feeling of possibility. That good things could grow here." He closed the journal gently. She was right, just not in the way either of us imagined. Anna was silent for a moment, her gaze following the creek's course toward the distant hills. "Land remembers," she said finally, old Apache saying. "Earth holds memory of what happens upon it, good and bad." "Martha used to say that too," Caleb replied, surprised. "Where did she learn it? Perhaps from trading with my people. Perhaps from listening to the land itself." Anna smiled. "Some truths are discovered many times by many hearts." They sat together as the afternoon light softened toward evening, each content in the other's company, each carried forward by the current of a shared vision. Around them, Paz Alta prepared to present itself to the world, a living testament to possibility, blooming in unlikely soil. The governor's visit marked a turning point for Paz Alta. What had begun as an experimental arrangement received official recognition as a model for territorial development. Resources were allocated for expansion, a proper schoolhouse, improved roads, a small infirmary combining Western medicine with Apache healing practices. Over the following years, the community flourished beyond all expectations. Families from both cultures, drawn by reports of prosperity and harmony, settled within its expanding boundaries. The population grew steadily, reaching nearly 300 souls by the time 5 years had passed since Judge Everett's historic ruling. Caleb watched these developments with quiet satisfaction, though the responsibilities of leadership often left him weary. He had passed his 70th birthday, his hair now completely silver, his movements slower but still determined. If anything, age had increased the respect accorded him by both communities. His counsel sought on matters ranging from water rights to marriage disputes. Anna had blossomed as well, growing into her role with natural grace. Now in her early 30s, she had become a powerful voice not just within Paz Alta, but in territorial politics, traveling occasionally to represent their interests in larger forums. Her command of English had become impeccable, though she was equally eloquent in her native tongue when addressing her people. Their partnership remained the foundation of Paz Alta's governance, a balance of perspectives that served the community. Well, together with Natsan, they had created a council system that incorporated traditional Apache consensus building with settler democratic practices, resulting in decisions that generally satisfied all factions. On a warm summer evening, as Paz Alta prepared for its annual Founders' Day celebration commemorating Judge Everett's ruling, Caleb sat on his porch watching the sunset. The ranch house, though still his residence, had evolved into a community building as well, its rooms serving various administrative functions during daylight hours. The garden Martha had once dreamed of now surrounded the house in vibrant profusion, tended by a rotating group of women from both cultures. Evening primrose had spread beyond the original planting, their golden blooms preparing to open as darkness approached. Anna joined him, bringing 2 cups of coffee. She had returned that morning from a week-long journey to the territorial capital, her mission to secure additional recognition for Apache land rights within Paz Alta's boundaries. "Successful trip?" Caleb asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. She nodded, settling into the chair beside him with a sigh of contentment at being home. "The new territorial secretary is more sympathetic than his predecessor. We have written acknowledgement now. The Shadow Water people have permanent rights to the Northern Valley and the sacred caves." The achievement was significant, representing years of patient negotiation. Caleb raised his cup in salute. "Well done. Natsan must be pleased." "He is," Anna confirmed, a smile warming her features, though he pretends to be unsurprised, as is his way. They shared a knowing look, both familiar with the Apache chief's stoic demeanor that concealed deep satisfaction in his people's security. Now in his 70s, Natsan had gradually transferred more responsibilities to younger leaders, though his wisdom remained the bedrock of tribal decisions. Below the porch, the yard bustled with activity as preparations continued for the next day's celebration. Tables were being arranged under cottonwood trees, cooking pits dug for traditional Apache dishes alongside settler barbecue methods. Children darted between adults, their mixed heritage visible in features and clothing that borrowed from both cultures. "Look at them," Caleb said softly. "Not Arizona or Apache, just children of Paz Alta." Anna followed his gaze, her expression thoughtful. "New generation. They will not remember time before, when walls stood between peoples." The observation carried weight. These children were growing up in a world fundamentally different from the one Caleb and Anna had known in their youth. To them, cooperation between cultures was the natural order rather than a radical experiment. "That's the real legacy," Caleb said. "Not buildings or laws, but changed hearts." Ina nodded, her hand moving unconsciously to touch the pendant she wore, a companion piece to the one she had given Caleb years earlier, this one set with a stone he had carved for her, bearing the image of a bridge spanning a chasm. The gesture did not go unnoticed. Caleb's own hand found his pendant, the familiar weight a constant reminder of journeys taken and yet to come. The matching symbols had become recognized throughout the community as emblems of Paz Alta's founding principles, replicated in various forms on public buildings and official documents. As darkness settled over the land, the evening primrose began to open, their blooms luminous in the gathering twilight. From the Apache camp across the creek came the sound of drums, a rhythm that spoke of celebration and continuity. Nearest the house, a group of settler children had joined Apache youths in a dance that combined elements from both traditions, their movements illuminated by newly lit torches. "I've been thinking," Caleb said after a comfortable silence. "It might be time to step back. Let younger voices lead the council." Anna studied him, her dark eyes perceptive as always. "You are tired?" "Not tired exactly, more aware of time." He gestured toward the celebration preparations. "Paz Alta has strong roots now. It will continue to grow whether I'm guiding it or not. This is true, Anna acknowledged. But your wisdom is still needed. She paused, considering. Perhaps different role. Elder advisor rather than daily administrator. The suggestion held appeal. Relief from constant demands without complete withdrawal from the community he had helped. Build. That could work, he agreed. And you? Any thoughts of changing your path? Anna's gaze returned to the yard where young families gathered in easy fellowship. I have been asked again to represent Paz Alta in territorial government. Full-time. Position in the capital. The news was both surprising and not. Anna's diplomatic skills had long been recognized beyond their boundaries. An honor well-deserved, Caleb said. Will you accept? She was silent for a long moment, her expression reflective. My heart is here, she said finally. In this place where worlds meet, my work is not finished. The simple declaration carried echoes of decisions made years earlier. Choices to remain, to build, to believe in possibility. Caleb felt a surge of gratitude for this woman who had entered his life through chance and transformed it through choice. I'm glad, he said simply. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a small delegation, representatives from both settler and Apache communities coming to finalize details for the next day's ceremonies. The business of governance continued, practical concerns, momentarily taking precedence over philosophical reflection. Yet as the evening progressed, Caleb found his thoughts returning to the journey that had brought them to this point. From a wounded woman found on a desert trail to a thriving community that defied all expectations, from isolation and grief to connection and purpose. Martha would have seen it as evidence of her belief that kindness was never wasted, that extending a hand across division could transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. The land remembered indeed. It held the memory of choices made, paths taken, hands extended in moments of need. As the moon rose over Paz Alta, its light illuminating the confluence of cultures that had become its hallmark, Caleb felt a deep contentment settle in his chest. Whatever the future held, something valuable had been created here, a legacy that would continue long after those who had founded it were gone. Seeds planted in dry ground, now blossoming beneath desert stars. 20 years passed, seasons turning like pages in a well-loved book. Paz Alta grew from experimental community to established settlement, its unique governance structure studied and occasionally replicated elsewhere in the territory. What had once seemed radical gradually became accepted, then admired, then ordinary. The natural way of things. Caleb moved through his 80s with the same quiet determination that had characterized his earlier years, though his role had indeed shifted to that of elder statesman. He no longer participated in daily administration, but remained a respected voice in major decisions, his perspective valued for its historical depth and practical wisdom. The ranch house had been transformed. The original structure remained at its heart, preserved as a historical center, but additions had expanded it into a proper community building with council chambers and meeting rooms. Caleb had moved to a smaller cottage nearby, built in a style that blended settler construction with Apache design elements, a physical embodiment of Paz Alta's philosophy. On the morning of his 85th birthday, he woke before dawn, as had been his lifelong habit. Despite the protests of his aging body, he dressed and made his way to the porch of his cottage, settling into the rocking chair to watch daybreak over the land he had helped transform. The view had changed significantly over the decades. Where once had stood only his isolated ranch, now spread a small but vibrant settlement. Adobe buildings, with wooden porches lined well-maintained streets. Gardens flourished between structures, the desert made to bloom through careful stewardship of water resources. In the distance, The Apache encampment had evolved into a permanent village, its design honoring traditional forms while incorporating practical innovations. Most heartening to Caleb were the figures already moving through this landscape. Young people whose heritage included both settler and Apache ancestry, the physical embodiment of Paz Alta's bridging of worlds. Children born into a community where cooperation was the expected norm rather than a radical experiment. As the sun cleared the eastern hills, painting the desert in gold and rose, Anna appeared on the path leading to his cottage. Now, in her early 50s, she carried herself with the dignity of hard-earned wisdom. Her hair, still mostly black, but threaded with silver at the temples, was braided in the traditional style of an Apache elder. "Happy birthday, old friend," she greeted him, mounting the steps with the fluid grace that had never left her. "You're up early, even for you." Caleb smiled, gesturing to the second chair he kept ready for her frequent visits. "Best time of day, quiet enough to hear the land speaking." Anna settled beside him, producing a small package wrapped in soft leather. "A gift," she said, placing it in his weathered hands, "for the man who saw possibility where others saw only division." Inside was a carved wooden box, its surface decorated with intricate patterns combining Apache symbols with settler motifs. When opened, it played a simple melody, the folk tune Martha had often hummed while working around the house, rendered with surprising accuracy by the hidden mechanism. "How did you know her song?" Caleb asked, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Anna's smile held gentle amusement. "You hum it yourself when deep in thought." "For years, I wondered about its origin. Then Rosa remembered hearing Martha sing it at the trading post long ago." Rosa was one of the few remaining tribal elders who had known Martha personally, her memories a precious connection to the time. Before Paz Alta's founding, Caleb nodded, oddly comforted by this evidence that Martha's influence continued to ripple outward in unexpected ways. "Thank you," he said simply, knowing Anna would understand the depth of feeling behind the plain words. They sat in companionable silence as the settlement came fully to life below them, each lost in private reflection. Eventually, Anna spoke, her tone thoughtful. "Do you remember that day on the trail, when you found me?" "Every detail," Caleb replied. The memory remained vivid despite the passage of time. The blood trail in the dust, Anna's defiant eyes. Despite her injury, the weight of her fevered body across dust's back. Strange to think how close we came to missing each other entirely. Anna nodded, her expression contemplative. "In my tradition, we believe certain meetings are written in the stars long before we are born, destined encounters that shape the course of many lives." The notion aligned with things Martha had sometimes said, viewing coincidence as the visible surface of deeper patterns. Caleb had grown more open to such perspectives over the years of his association with the Apache, finding wisdom in their perception of interconnection. "If so, I'm grateful for whatever forces brought our paths together," he said. His hand rose to touch the pendant he still wore daily, the silver worn smooth by years of handling, Martha's stone still vibrant at its center. Anna's own hand mirrored the gesture, finding her matching pendant. The twin symbols had become the official emblem of Paz Alta, representing the bridge between cultures that defined their community. "The council is preparing a celebration for this afternoon," she informed him, changing the subject. "Nothing too elaborate," she added, knowing his preference for simplicity. "But people wish to honor your birthday, especially the children. They have prepared something special." Caleb nodded his acceptance, recognizing the importance of such ceremonies in community life. "I'll be there, though I'd prefer not to be the center of attention for long." Anna's laugh was warm with understanding. "Some things never change. Old friend." The celebration, despite Anna's assurances, proved more extensive than Caleb had anticipated. It seemed the entire population of Paz Alta had gathered in the central plaza, bringing gifts and good wishes. Tables groaned with food, combining culinary traditions from both cultures. Music filled the air, Apache drums and flutes harmonizing with settler fiddles and guitars in compositions unique to their community. Most moving was the presentation by the school children. They had prepared a historical pageant depicting Paz Alta's founding, with solemn young actors portraying Caleb, Anna, Natsan, and Judge Everett. Their simple dramatization captured the essence of those early days with surprising insight, emphasizing not the conflicts but the moments of connection that had built bridges between worlds. As the long day finally drew to a close, Caleb found himself unexpectedly weary. The celebrations had been joyful but taxing for a man of his advanced years. Anna, ever perceptive, noticed his flagging energy and smoothly organized his departure, fielding final well-wishes so he could retire to his cottage. "Rest well," she said at his door, her eyes holding concern. "I'll come by in the morning." Caleb nodded gratefully. "Thank you for everything." The words encompassed not just the day's arrangements, but decades of partnership, of shared vision, of hard-won achievement. Anna seemed to understand, as she so often did. She squeezed his hand briefly, then left him to his solitude. Inside, Caleb lit a single lamp, its warm glow sufficient for his needs. He settled in his favorite chair, the music box Anna had given him open on the table beside him, its gentle melody filling the quiet room. Despite his physical fatigue, his mind remained alert, filled with images from the day, faces young and old. The community gathered in celebration of not just his life, but what they had built together. He must have dozed, for he woke to find the lamp burning low, the room filled with shadows. Something had disturbed his sleep, a presence, a shift in the air. He straightened, alert despite his years. "Who's there?" he called softly. No answer came, yet the sensation persisted. Not threatening, but certainly present. A familiar scent seemed to drift through the room. Sourdough baking, the lavender soap Martha had always used. Impossible, of course, yet undeniably there. "Martha," he whispered, feeling slightly foolish yet compelled to speak. The music box, which had wound down hours earlier, suddenly began to play again, its melody clear in the quiet room. Beside it, through the window, Caleb could see the evening primrose in his garden glowing in the moonlight, their golden blooms luminous against the darkness. A profound peace settled over him, deep and encompassing. Understanding flowered in his mind. Clear as dawn light, his path had come full circle. What had begun in loss had transformed into creation. What had started as an act of individual compassion had grown into a community of connection. The land remembered, and so would those who came after. Caleb closed his eyes, a smile touching his lips. When Anna found him the next morning, still seated in his chair, the smile remained, serene, knowing, at peace. The music box played its final notes as she entered, then fell silent. She stood very still, understanding immediately what had occurred. No grief seized her, only a deep appreciation for a life fully lived, a purpose completely fulfilled. She approached slowly, taking his cold hand in hers one last time. "Journey well, my friend," she whispered. "Your path is now among the stars, but your footprints remain here, guiding those who follow." In the days that followed, all of Paz Alta mourned, yet celebrated too. Caleb was laid to rest beneath the cottonwood trees near the ranch house, beside the simple stone that had marked Martha's resting place for so many years, united in death as they had been separated in life. Inda oversaw the ceremonies, bringing together Apache burial traditions with settler memorial practices in a fusion that honored both cultures while creating something new, the hallmark of Paz Alta itself. As twilight fell on the day of Caleb's burial, she stood alone by the fresh grave, the pendant he had worn for so many years now hanging alongside her own. Twin symbols, reunited. "Your name will be remembered," she promised softly, "in stories told to children not yet born, in the way we live together on this land." Above her, the first stars appeared in the deepening blue. Below, in gardens, throughout the settlement, evening primrose opened their golden blooms to the night air. Life continuing its eternal cycle, beauty emerging from the harshest conditions, hope persisting despite all odds. Paz Alta continued to flourish long after its founders had passed into memory, then legend. The principles they had established took root deeply, spreading outward like seeds carried on desert winds. Other communities adopted aspects of their governance, their educational practices, their respect for diverse traditions existing in harmony. And always, at the heart of these evolving settlements, remained the simple truth that had started with one man's decision to help a wounded stranger. Even in the driest desert, an oasis can be born if someone has the courage to extend a hand.